You are listening to Insights from the Conference Board.
Hello, my name is John Metselaar, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to this next edition of Insights, a series which helps senior executives address challenges and stay informed about current issues ahead of market trends. This series is brought to you by the Conference Board, and it's part of this series I have folded into my own drive, which is learning to lead innovation, lessons from the best, lessons from those chief technology and innovation officers. And in that context, today, I'm sitting down with Maria Velissariou. Welcome, Maria. Thank you so much for joining me. It's an honor and pleasure to have you with me.
Thank you for the invitation, John. It's great to be here today.
So by now, Maria and I know each other several years. We first met at the symposium in Frankfurt. We stayed in touch, and recently we found that relationship turned into something tangible, and that's our conversation today. So thank you also for all the preparation that you put into this, Maria. And so let me start by introducing who you are, so the audience knows who is providing all these valuable insights. Maria is an R&D and science thought leader who specializes in guiding global ambidextrous organizations. And you'll be hearing that tongue twister, ambidextrous and ambidexterity, come back several times throughout the conversation. Most recently, and that's significant, Maria was the Global Corporate R&D Vice President and Chief Science Officer for Mars Incorporated. She was responsible for the enterprise-wide approach to quality, food safety, and scientific regulatory affairs, and delivery of Mars's R&D strategy in partnership with business segments. She also led the R&D digitalization strategy for Mars by equipping the function with new digital capabilities to unlock deeper insights and agility to drive innovation and future-proof the business. Before Mars, Maria held several senior leadership positions, including Chief Science and Technology Officer at the Institute of Food Technologies, and as VP Global Nutrition R&D and VP Quaker Foods North America R&D at PepsiCo. And that's how we met the first time. Throughout her career, Maria has been strategically focused on translating science and technology opportunities into scalable innovation solutions. She served on the board of directors of the Chicago Council for Science and Technology, is a member of the advisory council at the Women Business Collaborative, and is a long-term advocate for increasing diversity in STEM. She's also a mentor to multiple entrepreneurs around the globe. Maria, all the way back, earned a PhD and master's in biochemical engineering from the University of Birmingham in the UK, and holds a chemical engineering degree from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in Greece. She also studied executive and digital leadership at Cornell. She has presented at various global conferences, one of them we met, and featured in diverse media, including the US FDA Tech Talk podcast, Wall Street Journal even, Axios, AI Magazine, and Food Manufacturing. And as you already figured from maybe her name and her background in Thessaloniki, she is a native of Greece, but also holds UK and USA citizenships, and lives in Washington, DC at the moment. Again, very warm welcome to Maria Velissariou. And I want to go, and as I often like to do, as we talk about, I already alluded to it, today's topic is ambidexterity. How do you become that ambidextrous leader? That leader that knows how to perform and transform, that knows that deft balance, that two-handed balance of managing and leading innovation, or mostly leading innovation. And so we're going to talk about that, what that means. How do you develop? How do you become an ambidextrous leader? But that's not enough. How do you then also, as a leader, go and turn that into that ambidexterity into your organization? How do you bring your organization with you to also for them to become that deft two-handed entity that drives your innovation efforts forward into value creation and value capturing? So let's start with when it comes to ambidextrous leader, how would you summarize that, Maria?
First, thank you for the very kind introduction, John. An ambidextrous leader, as you said, is a leader who can perform and transform at the same time and be one step ahead. To future-proof and grow, R&D leaders must master a new ambidextrous paradigm with speed, with agility, and with scale. And I see 5 key requirements for this. One is thought leadership that requires broad thinking alongside the core functional aptitudes. The second one is combining science and social meaning. Very, very important to combine the two. The third is about being an agile problem solver. You pivot while you take intelligent risks. The fourth is about championing diverse teams behind a unified purpose. And the fifth one is always winning hearts and minds.
Okay, that resonates immediately. That feels like a very nice summation. What I also love is that you go beyond mind. You know, many leaders of at least my generation have grown up with you need to be a strategic thinker. That has to be the priority. And unfortunately, many stop there and don't develop the additional competencies and skills that are required to become a true and authentic and ambidextrous leader. So that sounds great. Let's go and take them one by one. And indeed, let's start with the mind. Broad thinking alongside core functional aptitude. So how would you describe that? Can you bring that to life a bit? What does it mean?
Yes. Today I'm going to share several illustrative examples or stories to help frame and contextualize the main points that I want to make. And many of these examples will be from my recent role as Chief Science Officer and VP of Corporate R&D of a global organization where global food safety is paramount. But let's go to broad thinking alongside the core functional aptitudes. This one requires a strong understanding of the business coupled with robust functional capabilities, allowing a leader to govern and carry out transformation initiatives. But that is not enough. It is no longer enough. To ascend to the next level of ambidextrous leadership, you must also be a thought leader. And to be a thought leader, you have to think in different ways that perhaps make us all uncomfortable. A thought leader has the unique capability to shape future outcomes and the future of an organization. And this includes conversations beyond the specific organizations. For instance, science and policy. A thought leader looks at the broader context beyond their business and then references and correlates their experiences, their perspectives, and make the connections that interpret the trends, interpret those insights into foresights. This is how you can influence and direct strategy, by being one step ahead. And it requires a lot of trial and error. There is not a playbook to say this is how you become a thought leader. You have to put yourself out there, you have to experiment, you have to be open to learning, and you have to be open to adapting in the process. And it is all about anticipation and shaping. You can't wait. We cannot afford to be reactive these days. It's important to be always on the lookout and become very savvy about how we combine our functional expertise, our business leadership, and our broader thinking that goes outside our organization.
When I hear you talk, many people believe they can be a thought leader by just becoming excellent in their functional expertise. I've been working with this recently with my organization, the Conference Board as well, that to become a thought leader, you need to take that broader view, right? I love what you said around anticipate, about influence, about directing the strategies. If you want to truly contribute to that, you have to go, it's your responsibility to take that broader view of things, to understand, as you mentioned policy as an example. You also mentioned business, right? As an innovator, it's not only about being good at R&D. Innovation is only successful when it creates that value. And how do you capture value? By connecting the technical elements to the business elements, to the commercial elements. So a very, very important point I totally resonate with and very close to my experience. Anything else on this point? Do you have any illustration by any chance, or shall we move to the next one?
I just wanted to make a comment here that being excellent in your functional area is cost of entry. You have to be that, but it is not enough. And to understand your business cold, it is also a requirement. But how do you go beyond that? That is the key.
Yeah. How do you become let's say, a researcher, bring that to thought leadership and bring that to influencing?
Yes, functional excellence is cost of entry, and understanding your business, your organization's business is very important. You need to understand the business cold. But how do you go beyond that? How do you understand the broader world and the context of meaning of this world for your organization? I think this is the key question here.
Yeah, become a functional expert, take that into thought leadership, and bring that into influencing. These are the three steps which you so nicely summarize, and indeed that's where it needs to start. Okay, let's move to number 2, which is all about connecting science with the social environment, science-based and socially meaningful. Love I love that term. Looking forward to hear you talk about it. What it means to you.
I'd like to bring this concept to life with something that was not a success. It was a failure. And it sat really at the interface of radical innovation and technology capabilities. This is actually a field that has been pioneered by Roberto Verganti. The example that I would like to mention here is that of golden rice. And the failure of golden rice to successfully launch and alleviate vitamin A deficiency in many parts of the world, particularly in Asia. Although vocal opposition to GMO and somewhat muddled presentation of the scientific facts is the most cited cause of failure, there is also another less publicized dimension. And this is the cultural acceptability of rice, which is life-sustaining, in an unfamiliar color, which is golden. Many Asian cultures follow family tradition, and when there is not a targeted, meaningful nutrition education, there was no other constructive or instructive input to ease off that cultural norm. People could not accept golden rice. And today, despite unlimited science and development resources, a socially acceptable vitamin A fortified rice with all the health benefits to those who need them most is still elusive.
And so fundamentally, it's getting back to being customer centric, right? As well, and that's indeed a challenge for most organizations where R&D is often still led, where innovation is often still led by the R&D organization. And then, but let's not forget what the consumer thinks. Is that fair?
It is, absolutely. And I think it also goes beyond the consumer as we interrogate the consumer. You know, as we ask questions to the consumer, it's very important to understand the societal norms, the societal context where the consumers are. Ask those open questions, so to speak, and try to go a little deeper into the meaning of things and how this meaning translates into their cultural experiences and what is acceptable to them. So on the success side, I would like to highlight 2 digital innovations where positive inflection points between technology and societal constructs drove some really significant nonlinear growth. One is the dizzying acceleration of telemedicine during the recent pandemic, and this is both for humans and for pets. And the other one is the rise of mobile banking across both developed and developing countries, which flourished when mobile telephony became an inextricable part of life, even in the remotest and poorest parts of the planet. This in my mind epitomize the radical technology and radical societal shifts coming together and creating the perfect circumstances for those innovations to flourish. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the importance of artificial intelligence and how AI can be socially intuitive. Artificial intelligence generates a lot of value, and more we see this with numerous examples. Adopting artificial intelligence can maximize this value, but it requires significant partnership between several functions like R&D, manufacturing, digital technologies, procurement, marketing, and so forth. There are so many data out there, but it is very important to detect what is a real signal from what is noise. And by detecting the real signal, then to establish the right actions and in a timely fashion. Speed is of the essence. AI can unlock speed, but one needs to also be very judicious about when to use AI. Not all problems require AI solutions. And that's why it is important to combine AI with user centricity in order to get the best possible outcomes and drive that innovation and drive the value. And for this, we need to keep an eye because the speed of AI applications is so fast that it's fair to say that sometimes we cannot even keep up with it. The final point that I would like to make about science and social meaning is with an example that takes us to agriculture. Let's take a look at mycotoxins and how supply chain is innovating to prevent the formation and the consumption of mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are harmful contaminants that they affect approximately 80% of all the common agricultural crops. And this exposes billions of people through the world, around the world in bad ways. A quarter of the world's population is adversely affected by these toxins. And one particular toxin, which is called aflatoxin, is the most dangerous food hazard according to the World Health Organization. It causes serious health damage in organs, stunts growth, and can even cause death. The regulatory exposure limits vary by country, and people have no to little awareness or actually no alternative options. Particularly in poor rural communities, farmers sell the good crop and they use the affected leftovers at home. To address this issue effectively, we need a suite of science and technology solutions for better prediction and prevention, robust quality assurance and control in food chains, and operating or at above regulatory limits. We also need systematic education in communities, particularly with the rural, particularly in rural areas and communities where they do not have ready access to education.
Thank you for those very illustrative stories, and thank you also for almost correcting me of staying at a very bland level of technology and consumer need to come together. What you're doing here is you're taking that up to a higher level. You're talking about science and how it connects. It needs to connect with our social environment, and I find that very inspirational. I always say, many people think digital transformation is all about digital, but it's more about digital transformation. It's less about digital than it is about transformation. And that transformation needs to be serving our society, needs to be serving humanity. Christian Krom is one of our senior fellows. He says that so beautifully. He's written a book which he calls "Go Digital, Stay Human." And so your stories are very nice illustrations of that absolutely critical need of getting things right for our planet, for our world, and for our posterity, frankly. All right, we need to move on because we have a lot to cover. You have a lot to cover, which is great. Let's talk about agility. Your third point is around agility and how to apply that into problem solving. Ensuring that you fall in love with the problem before you jump to solutions and do that in a responsible way, taking intelligent risks. Back to you, Maria. What are your key points on that third topic?
Let me start with something that has been part of my career, most part of my career, and this is the traditional approach to innovation. Certainly, the approach that the large food corporations have taken for a very long time, and this is really a systematic linear process. But the explosion of startups and the adoption of technology constructs like the minimum viable product is really changing the landscape. And it requires a nimble, yet safe and legal approach to innovating with speed. And also, it requires a new way about where and how to iterate. Do we iterate before a launch or do we iterate after a launch? Where do you take the risk? And intelligent risk taking is really about determining how much research you need before you go to market with a new product. When do you have enough data to launch a product? You don't need to have all the information, but have enough information to do the right thing so that you can be the first in market and to create a trend. So having that critical ability to make a decision can make a big difference in long-term success.
Yeah, balanced risk-taking indeed is a very, very important role of the leadership, and the organization depends on you often to go and take that on. Correct. Any examples you want to go and illustrate?
It is really, if you think about products, the traditional, if you think about the traditional food innovation, to create an incremental type of innovation, it will probably take you 18 months in the traditional world. But 18 months is like an eternity in the world of a startup. So how do you shorten that innovation lead time to something that is a few months as opposed to 18 months? And if we talk about more demanding innovations, we're talking about 2 years plus. We used to think of 2 years as being short term, but in the current climate, in the current world where the speed of science and the speed of change is so fast, 2 years actually now qualifies a strategic time frame. So we really need to rethink, and we need to recalibrate the time paradigm as well as the risk paradigm.
Yeah, there's in a sense that's ambidexterity. How do you manage speed with quality, agility and risk? And I know you have one more example, right, Maria?
Yeah, indeed, and this example is very different. This is from sorry, we'll need to cut this.
Yeah.
Yes, I have one more example.
Let me start. That's easier for Derek if I now start again. Otherwise, he needs to cut twice. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and Maria, I know you have one more example you want to share in this section. Correct? Go for it.
Yes, I have an example. It's a slightly different, and this is from the nonprofit world during my tenure as Chief Science and Technology Officer at the Institute of Food Technologists. At the behest of the food science administrators, we investigated the state of funding for food science and technology research in the United States. And we found that it had suffered from sluggish public funding for over a decade, while the complexity of the food system was growing. We also found that the private sector was not stepping up adequately to address the void. We captured all of this in a white paper, which we published in early 2020, and backed it up with advocacy efforts. And through the publication and the efforts, we held the mirror and we said, this is not good enough. It is exciting now to see that the National Science Foundation introduced the Director for Technology Innovation Partnerships, which is part of the CHIPS and Science Act, which Congress passed in July of this year. This is a path forward for greater funding across the food system, and it's a very exciting development for food science as a whole.
Excellent. Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, and congrats on that achievement as well. While I listened to you, I internalized that we're following the my old approach to leadership, which I got conditioned heavily into during my almost 30 years at P&G, which is we always talk about the 5 E's, right? But the role of leadership really is along 3 levels. I always say one is envisioning, then it's enabling to execute, and then thirdly, which is often forgotten, is engaging and empowering. And so far we've covered the first 2, but now we're moving into the engaging and empowering by talking about diversity, and how do you include that diversity alongside that unified purpose that you touched on when you rattled off your 5 key points. So why don't you go and double click on this important and often neglected area?
Sure. The first thing one must do to champion diverse teams is to break down the silos and the primacy of linear thinking. When you champion diverse teams, you nurture diversity of thought, or cognitive diversity. And diversity of thought fosters many wonderful things like rich debate, entertains differences or paradoxes, and help us find a way to unify behind a common forward direction. Quoting Aristotle, my favorite philosopher, it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. And this is what diverse teams should do. And although it takes a lot more effort and maybe a little more time to establish diverse teams, when they are established, they are far superior in performance and their impact is more lasting. I would also like to use another example from the world of digitalization and R&D. This is where you bring together traditional scientists and digital workers, and you champion their partnership and collaboration, and you help them create an aligned system where they govern together and they articulate a common purpose. And by doing so, you really shape a mental model that says digital technologists, digital scientists, they think in a certain way, traditional scientists think in another way. You bring them together and you create almost like a new scaffolding where this knowledge is reorganized, and therefore you create something that it is unified. It's diverse, but it is unified. It is really creating a new mental model.
Powerful. I always say that there's a heavy focus on diversity, but diversity can. Everybody say, yeah, you need diversity to go on to unleash innovation. I think there is a yes, but, and you are touching on this big time here, which is if you do not include your diversity, it can actually work against you. Because people will go and separate off in their little streams. And seek like-minded people, which leads to a lot of similar thinking, right? Groupthink very often. So, and I like the way that you use this unified purpose here to go and take that diversity and ensure that you lead to inclusion. Thank you for sharing those thoughts, and that allows us to go into our last point, which we need for time reasons as well, which is taking all this and then influence, and doing that not only mentally, as per how we started, but also with hearts and minds. So, how do you do this, Maria?
This is where I think scientists, they need to double down and work hard. And this is to develop and apply leadership soft skills like the mastery of deep listening, empathy, understanding the needs of your associates and your stakeholders. And it requires a very strong commitment and patience to develop and acquire those skills and capabilities. Think in terms of co-developing and investing as opposed to ordering and expecting. It is about being a servant leader, and this ties back to the championing of diverse teams. And finally, an ambidextrous leader must also look inward toward their own personal development journey. And this requires a mindset of continuous learning and accepting feedback. Being assertive with what you know and share your wisdom is important, but it's equally important to be humble about what you don't know. And understanding that there are things that are outside your wheelhouse of expertise, and you need to do something to fill that gap. And particularly with knowledge being developed so fast these days, it is absolutely impossible to be on top of everything. You have to work hard to understand what you're going to invest in learning. And this will pay dividends because it will help you track with all the developments, both from a functional expertise standpoint, but also from a broader societal viewpoint. I'd like to share a personal example, which was a challenge for me. Recently, I was leading a strategy within a broader digitalization effort within R&D, and the particular strategy was concerned with the scaling up and commercialization of genomics, a genomics capability. This is not in my wheelhouse. I certainly have an appreciation for genomics, but I'm not a genomics expert. So I decided to enroll in a digital leadership course with Cornell University to quickly upskill myself and be able to fill this gap and perform my responsibilities as a leader.
This is how you got to your Cornell gig that I shared at the introduction in your bio. Interesting, great story. And indeed, it's a nice illustration of what I always say, which is one of the key priorities of leaders today is they need to develop the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to go out and learn new things, and tell people around them that I don't know, I don't have the answers. And by the way, can you help me get those answers? And by the way, that's a great way to engage your organization and empower them because they feel they can contribute more. But it's not easy for conditioned leaders or leaders that have been conditioned for multiple decades to be the know-it-all and to tell people what to do, which, as you said, in today's environment is just it's just not the reality anymore. Okay, we are at the end of the 5 points. Now, the one question that remains for me is okay, that sounds all great. What are the challenges that you have faced in that journey where you developed this framework and these skills?
Sure, there are visible and invisible challenges along the way. I would say ask questions, ask the important questions, particularly in times of uncertainty. Dare to be vulnerable and seek to understand. Challenge the status quo and encourage risk-taking, but also understand how far an organization can go with risk at any one point. The third for me is it's very practical. Apply your core functional aptitude, the things that you can do very well, with new skills that you acquire along the way. Always consult with your team, but be ready to make the decisions. And the last is about inspiration. Don't forget, you must inspire and build trust. You must be honest, benevolent, and competent to bring others along with you.
Yeah, I love that last point. I see there's a lot of do as I say, but not do as I do. Leaders need to become, we need to walk the talk. And that's an outage around us across all forms of leadership. Thank you for those inspirations at the end. Let me just go and recap the 5 points for completeness again. Number 1, broad thinking alongside core functional aptitude. Become a thought leader, become an influencer. Influence the strategy of your company. Number 2, be science-based and socially meaningful. Connect science with what the world needs, what our society needs. Number 3, pivoting while taking intelligent risk, applying an agile approach to problem solving. Number 4, championing diverse teams towards a unified purpose in an R&D organization so that you really drive inclusion. And number 5 is influenced by winning hearts and minds of your stakeholders and your associates. Maria, thank you very much. That was a marathon. And you know what? We're not even done yet, right? Because we are going to talk now about how to go and apply these principles to develop an ambidextrous organization. But I'm sure we need a break, and I'm sure our listeners need a break. So we're going to break this podcast in 2 parts. And so I want to thank you for part number 1, for these very interesting insights. I'm not going to say goodbye because I know that our listeners will be wanting to check into part number 2 as well. But for now, if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to our Insight podcast series or explore the entire catalog of our podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website at tcb.org/podcasts. Thank you very much all for listening, and I hope to see you back at session 2.
This has been Insights from the Conference Board.